The dust settled over the Montana plains like a blanket of copper, and gold as the sun dipped toward the mountains. Jack Sullivan stood at the edge of his family's ranch, watching the horizon with eyes that had seen too much for a man of 32. His father's ranch had once stretched as far as the eye could see, but disease had taken half the cattle 2 winters ago, and debt had claimed most of the rest. Now what remained was a skeleton of former glory, held together by nothing but stubbornness and the memory of better days. He rolled a cigarette with practiced fingers, the paper crinkling in the evening quiet. The wind carried the scent of sage and dry earth, the smell of home. The smell of everything he was about to lose. The bank had given him until the end of the month. 3 weeks to come up with money he didn't have, to save land that had been in his family for 3 generations. His father had died working this soil. His mother had been buried beneath the cottonwood tree near the creek. This wasn't just land. It was blood and bone and memory. The sound of hoofbeats pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see a rider approaching from the direction of town, moving fast. As the figure drew closer, Jack recognized the chestnut mare and his chest tightened. Alina Martinez. Even after all these months, the sight of her still hit him like a punch to the gut. She reined in her horse a few feet away, her dark hair windblown and wild beneath her worn hat. Her eyes, the color of strong coffee, searched his face with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he held her gaze. She'd been doing that since they were children, seeing right through whatever walls he tried to build. Elena dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd been born in a saddle. Her family owned the neighboring ranch, smaller than the Sullivan place, but thriving where his was failing. Her father was a shrewd businessman who'd diversified, running cattle and horses both, trading with the army and the railroad. Everything Jack's father had refused to do, too proud and too set in his ways. "Jack," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We need to talk." He took a drag from his cigarette, buying time. "Nothing to talk about, Alina. We said everything that needed saying 3 months ago." "That's not true, and you know it." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the worry lines around her eyes, the way her jaw was set with determination. "I heard about the bank. I heard they're going to foreclose. Word travels fast." He tried to keep his voice neutral, but bitterness crept in around the edges. "This is a small town, Jack. Everyone knows everyone's business." She paused, taking a breath like she was steadying herself for something difficult. "My father wants to buy your land." The words hung in the air between them like gun smoke. Jack felt his jaw clench, felt the muscles in his shoulders go rigid. Of course. Of course that's why she'd come. Not because she still cared, not because she wanted to help him, but to deliver the final blow. "Tell your father he can go to hell," Jack said quietly. Elena's eyes flashed. "He's offering a fair price, more than fair. Enough to pay off the bank and have something left over to start fresh somewhere else." "I don't want to start fresh somewhere else. This is my home. It won't be yours much longer if you can't pay the bank." Her voice rose, frustration breaking through. "Pride won't keep a roof over your head, Jack. It won't put food on your table. This isn't about pride," he shot back, anger finally breaking free. "This is about family, about legacy, about not giving up everything my father worked for." "Your father's dead." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, and he saw her flinch at her own harshness. She softened her tone, reaching out like she might touch his arm, then thinking better of it. "I'm sorry. I know that's harsh. But he's gone, Jack, and he would want you to survive. He would want you to have a life. Don't tell me what my father would want. You didn't know him like I did. I knew him well enough to know he loved you more than he loved this land." Elena's voice cracked slightly. "He told me so himself. That last summer before he died. He said his biggest fear was that you'd sacrifice everything for a piece of ground that didn't love you back." Jack turned away, unable to look at her, unable to let her see how those words cut him. His father had said that. Had worried about that. He'd never mentioned it to Jack. Had never suggested that the ranch was anything but the most important thing in the world. "Why do you care?" he asked, his voice rough. You made it clear we were done. You said you couldn't watch me destroy myself trying to save something that was already lost. I said that because I love you. You stubborn fool. The words burst out of her like they'd been held back too long, building up pressure until they had no choice but to explode. I said that because it was killing me to watch you work yourself to the bone, to see you getting thinner and more tired and more desperate every day. I said that because I couldn't be the person who stood by and did nothing while you threw your life away. He turned back to face her then and saw tears glistening in her eyes. Elena Martinez, who could rope a steer and break a wild horse and shoot a rifle better than most men, who never cried, who was strong as the mountains themselves, had tears running down her cheeks. You think I wanted to leave, she continued, her voice breaking. You think that was easy for me. I've loved you since I was 15 years old, Jack Sullivan. I've loved you through every hard season and every stupid decision, through your father's death and your mother's grief. But I couldn't love you more than you loved this cursed land. That's not fair, he said, but the words sounded weak even to his own ears. Life's not fair. Love's not fair. She wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. I came here tonight to tell you my father's offer. But I'm also here to tell you something else. I'm leaving, going to California. My aunt has a hotel in Sacramento and she's offered me a job managing it. I leave in 2 weeks. The world seemed to tilt beneath Jack's feet. California. She was going to California, across mountains and deserts. So far away she might as well be going to the moon. And suddenly the ranch, the land, the legacy, all of it seemed to shrink down to nothing compared to the thought of Elena being gone from his life forever. Don't go, he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. Give me a reason to stay. He opened his mouth, but no words came. What could he offer her? A failing ranch. A man who couldn't let go of the past. A future of struggle and disappointment. She deserved better than that. She deserved someone who could give her stability, comfort, a real home instead of a dream that was crumbling to dust. That's what I thought, she said softly when the silence stretched too long. She turned back toward her horse, and Jack felt panic rise in his chest. Elena, wait. She paused but didn't turn around. You deserve better than what I can give you, he said, the words tearing out of him. You deserve someone who can take care of you properly, who can give you a good life. Not some broken, down cowboy who can't even hold on to his family's land. She turned then, and the look on her face was fierce and tender all at once. You'll find someone better, she said, but her voice shook with emotion. Someone who doesn't come with all this baggage, who can focus on building a future instead of clinging to the past. Jack crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He took her face in his calloused hands, making her look at him, really look at him. There is no one better than you, he whispered. There never has been. There never will be. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world contracted to just the two of them, standing in the fading light, years of longing and hurt and love hanging in the air between them. Then Elena made a small sound, something between a sob and a laugh, and kissed him. It was like coming home after a long, cold winter. Jack pulled her close, feeling her arms wrap around his neck, feeling her heart beating against his chest. He'd been so alone for so long, carrying everything by himself, too proud and too scared to let anyone help. But here was Elena, still here after everything, still fighting for him even when he wouldn't fight for himself. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena pressed her forehead to his. I can't watch you lose everything, Jack. I can't. I know, he said quietly. I know. They stood there as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the first stars began to appear. Jack thought about his father, about the weight of legacy and expectation. He thought about the years stretching ahead, trying to work land he couldn't afford to keep, watching it slip away piece by piece anyway. And he thought about Elena's words, about how his father had said he loved Jack more than the land. Maybe that was the real legacy. Not the acres of grass and dirt, but the love. The courage to choose life over pride, future over past. His father had built this ranch to give his family a good life, not to become a prison for his son. "Tell your father I'll take his offer," Jack said finally. Elena pulled back to look at him, surprise and hope warring on her face. "You mean it?" "I mean it." The words hurt, but they also felt like relief, like setting down a weight he'd been carrying for too long. "But I have conditions. I want to keep the house and 5 acres around it, including my parents' graves. The rest he can have, but that part's not for sale." "He'll agree to that," Elena said quickly. "I know he will." Jack nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside him, some locked door finally opening. "And I need to use part of the money to pay off the debts properly. Make sure everyone who extended me credit gets what they're owed. The rest. I was thinking maybe California has opportunities for a man who knows horses, knows cattle." Elena's smile was like sunrise. "I hear Sacramento needs good horsemen. The army posts nearby are always looking for reliable suppliers." "That's so." Jack found himself smiling back despite everything, despite the ache in his chest at the thought of leaving. "Wes, I better learn the rote, Wes, then." She kissed him again, softer this time, full of promise. "We'll learn it together." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal papers and hard conversations. Jack's neighbors came by, some to offer condolences, some to say they understood, some to tell him he was making a mistake. Old-timer Charlie, who'd worked for Jack's father for 30 years, came by with tears in his eyes. "Your daddy would be proud," Charlie said, his weathered hand gripping Jack's shoulder. "Takes more courage to let go than to hold on sometimes." Jack wasn't sure he believed that, but he appreciated the sentiment. He spent his last days on the ranch riding the property lines, memorizing the roll of the hills and the bend of the creek, the way the cottonwood trees' leaves sounded in the wind. He visited his parents' graves and told them he was sorry, but also that he was choosing to live. He hoped they'd understand. Elena was with him through all of it, steady and strong. She helped him pack up the house, sorting through generations of accumulated memories. Some things they would take with them: his mother's quilts and his father's pocket watch, photographs and letters. Other things they left for the new owners, furniture too heavy to transport, tools that belonged to this land. Her father, Miguel Martinez, was more generous than Jack had expected. The price he paid was indeed more than fair, and he readily agreed to Jack's conditions about keeping the house and graves. More than that, he offered advice about starting fresh in California, gave them letters of introduction to people he knew out west. "You're a good man, Jack Sullivan," Miguel said as they shook hands on the deal. "Stubborn as a mule, but good. Take care of my daughter, with my life," Jack promised. The morning they left, Jack stood one last time in front of his parents' graves. The new headstones he'd had carved were simple but solid, built to last. He'd arranged with Charlie, who was staying on to work for the Martinez family, to keep the graves tended. "I'm going to be happy," Jack said quietly to the silent stones. "I'm going to build something new. I hope that's enough. I hope you understand." The wind rustled through the cottonwood leaves, and Jack chose to take it as answer. They rode out as the sun was climbing. Jack and Elena side by side on their horses, leading a pack mule with their belongings. At the edge of the property, Jack turned for one last look. The house sat small and solid against the vast prairie, smoke rising from the chimney, where Charlie was making his breakfast. The land rolled away in all directions, beautiful and harsh and indifferent, just as it had always been. "You okay?" Elena asked softly. Jack turned to face the west, where the mountains rose purple and distant, where California waited beyond the horizon. "Yeah," he said, and found he meant it. "I'm okay." They rode into the rising sun, leaving Montana behind. The journey would be long and hard, weeks of travel through mountain passes and desert valleys. But they had good horses, enough money to see them through and each other. That was more than enough. Sacramento, when they finally reached it 6 weeks later, was bigger and louder and more chaotic than anywhere Jack had been. The gold rush days were over, but the city still thrummed with energy and opportunity. Elena's Aunt Rosa ran a respectable hotel near the center of town, a 3-story building with a restaurant on the ground floor and clean rooms above. Rosa was a formidable woman in her 50s, widowed, young and self-made, with Elena's dark eyes and a sharp business mind. She welcomed them warmly, and within days had Elena working in the hotel, while Jack started making contacts in the horse trade. It turned out the army did need reliable suppliers, and Jack's reputation for honesty and his knowledge of horses served him well. He started small, buying and training horses from local ranchers, then selling them to the cavalry posts. Within 6 months, he'd built up enough business to lease a small ranch outside the city, where he could keep stock and work with larger numbers. Elena thrived in her new role, managing the hotel with efficiency and warmth. She had a gift for making people feel welcome, for solving problems before they became crises. Under her management, the hotel's reputation grew, and they were often fully booked weeks in advance. On their 1-year anniversary of leaving Montana, Jack took Elena to a hill overlooking the Sacramento Valley. They sat on a blanket under the stars, much like they used to do back home, but everything was different now. Everything was new. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "Leaving?" Jack thought about it. Really thought about it. He'd be lying if he said he never thought about Montana, never missed the vast open spaces and the particular quality of light on the plains. Part of him would always belong to that land, to those graves, to that history. But when he looked at Elena, at the life they were building together, at the future spreading out before them like the valley below, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt hope. "No," he said firmly, "I don't regret it. That land was my past. You're my future." She smiled and kissed him softly. We're each other's future. 3 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the hotel, with Rosa and their new California friends in attendance. Charlie sent a telegram all the way from Montana that read simply, "Yo ar fedestro b periuda stop laro matiestaro stop bappa stop." Jack kept that telegram in his pocket for weeks, pulling it out sometimes when doubt crept in, when he wondered if he'd made the right choice. But those moments became fewer and farther between as the years rolled on. They built a good life in California. Jack's horse business grew into a small ranch of its own, profitable and sustainable. Elena eventually bought the hotel from her aunt, becoming a respected businesswoman in Sacramento. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and raised them with stories of Montana and the courage it takes to let go. Sometimes on quiet evenings, Jack would stand on the porch of their California ranch house and look east, thinking about the land he'd left behind. He wondered if the cottonwood tree still stood, if his parents' graves were still tended, if the house was still solid against the prairie wind. He wondered if Miguel Martinez was taking good care of the land, treating it with the respect it deserved. But then Elena would call him inside, or one of the children would need something, or there would be work to do, and he would turn back to the life he'd chosen, the life he'd almost let slip away because he'd confused legacy with land, because he'd thought holding on was the same thing as being strong. His father had built that ranch to create a better life for his family, and in the end, that's exactly what Jack had done too, just in a different way, in a different place. He'd honored his father not by clinging to the same patch of ground, but by having the courage to choose love over pride, future over past, life over death. On their 10th anniversary, Jack had a sign made for their California ranch, burned into a piece of cedar wood in careful letters. "The Sullivan Ranch," it read, and below that, a smaller inscription built on love, not land. Elena cried when she saw it, happy tears this time. "It's perfect," she said. Jack pulled her close, thinking about that evening in Montana when she'd ridden up with her father's offer, when she'd told him she was leaving, when everything had hung in the balance. He thought about how close he'd come to losing her, to losing everything that mattered, all for the sake of dirt and grass and stubbornness. "There is no one better than you," he whispered into her hair. The words he'd spoken a decade ago still true, still powerful, still the most important thing he'd ever said. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with love and laughter, and the shared memories of everything they'd been through. "And there's no one better than you, Jack Sullivan." We found that out together. Around them, their ranch hummed with live horses in the corrals, children's laughter from the house, the fertile California soil producing in ways the Montana prairie never could. It wasn't the legacy Jack had expected to build. It was better, because it was built not on the dreams of the dead, but on the love of the living. The sun set over the Sacramento Valley in shades of gold and crimson, painting the sky with colors that rivaled even Montana's famous sunsets. Jack stood with Elena on their porch, their hands intertwined, watching the day end and knowing tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. He'd left behind the land of his fathers, but he'd found something more valuable. He'd found that home wasn't a place you held on to, but a person you chose, again and again, through every sunrise and every sunset, through every hard decision and every small victory. And he'd learned that sometimes the greatest courage wasn't in holding on, but in letting go. Not because you were weak, but because you were finally strong enough to choose what truly mattered. Strong enough to choose love.